Cool. So I'm Henry Norton. I'm the founder and director of RW Search, which is a company that's been going for 4 years now. I set up the business after 1 year in a recruitment company called Charlton Morris. And the business has been through a lot of iterations since we started. Right now, we are. I'm on my own. With another person joining me next month. We're a medtech search firm. We like to focus on the higher level roles, but we do cover engineering, commercial, and various things in between. So on a bit of a growth journey at the minute, and yeah, looks good.
Perfect. Thanks, Henry. My name is Daniel Chatfield, director and founder of Uncover Talent. Qualified as a solicitor in South Africa many years ago, then moved across to the UK, worked for a big international recruitment business before setting up Uncover 2 years ago. We focus specifically on the legal risk and compliance sector, focusing on placing analysts from anywhere. Sorry, can we start that again? Cancel. Okay. Daniel Chatfield, director and founder of Uncover. We're a specialist legal risk and compliance recruitment agency that focuses on placing lawyers and legal risk and compliance professionals into law firms across the UK. Initially started my career as a lawyer in South Africa before moving across to the UK, where I worked for a large international recruitment business before setting up Uncover in 2021.
Brilliant. I'm going to do mine again because I realise I messed that up. So for James filming this, for editing this. But yeah, I'm Henry Norton. I'm the founder and director of RW Search. We're a medtech search firm, which has a vision to be the go-to search firm for building emerging medtech companies. We've got a really strong presence in surgical robotics. I'm an army of one at the minute, but on a growth journey for this year. So got some people joining me throughout the rest of this year and looking forward to where it goes.
Awesome.
That's good.
Cool. Shall we jump into it?
Let's go for it. So what are some of the key changes we've seen across the world of recruitment over the last 12 to 18 months, Daniel?
Yes, I think the recruitment space to a certain extent obviously is sector specific. I think in my world, the world of legal, I think we've been very fortunate enough that kind of against the backdrop of redundancies in the technology sector and sort of reduced hiring in various sectors, the legal risk and compliance space has remained quite resilient. Job flow has remained consistent across all levels of the market, with certain pockets remaining more busy than others. I think the space itself is largely driven by regulatory changes, and I think in the world we live in, if anything, those continue to increase, which is very encouraging for the space. I think probably the key things that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months, I'd probably say the time to hire has definitely increased. I think firms are struggling. I think it's largely led by two things. There is just a massive demand and not the supply of candidates. And I equally think it's because of the candidates that are potentially on the market and were looking, most of them have moved within the last sort of 6 to 12 months. So getting them to move again at the moment is proving quite challenging. And what we've also seen, which I've found quite interesting, is that candidates specifically, whereas 12 to 18 months ago, money was on everybody's mind, and it was quite easy to convince somebody to move by just dangling a carrot of sort of whatever 10, 20, whatever 20,000, whatever it might be in front of them. Whereas now it seems like all businesses on the salary front have caught up largely. So candidates have become a lot more discerning in terms of the things that they will look at. So it's a lot of the softer side. So it's a lot of the flexibility, it's a lot of the engagement, it's progression, it's development. So yeah, I'd probably say those are the two main things that we've seen, just the candidates being a lot more considered in terms of the roles they would take. And equally, I'd say the struggle from law firms to attract and pin down good candidates.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think 12 to 18 months ago, it was a completely candidate-driven market. I saw a lot of companies who would just send in a CV spec and then get a placement from it. And I think that's starting to change as we come into the present day. And we've seen it. We started with the tech companies with the layoffs over there. Medtech tends to lag behind a little bit. So what happens in tech usually trickles down to the medical devices and medtech space about 12 to 18 months later. So in my market especially, we've seen a few restructures at the top, but that's not necessarily indicative that the full market is going down the pan. There's a lot of companies that raised finance about 12 to 18 months ago that have got some really great opportunities and are now starting to really start spending that money. So our job flow actually has increased, and we've started working, but I think that's a change in our process, as what I'm hearing across the market from a lot of the tech recruiters anyway, is that they're having big challenges with the market, and job flow is down pretty much across the board. But yeah, as you say, the salaries are nowhere near what they used to be. I think people were just chucking money last year at job offers, and now candidates have got to consider the change a lot more. And yeah, it's very much now the client driven. We have to get jobs on first as opposed to leading with the candidate. But I think that's a good thing anyway. But I don't necessarily think that's completely unusual. I think it's more the market that I'm used to when I started my career in recruitment before, and it was just this crazy post-COVID boom. I think it's caused a lot of people who have entered the industry more recently don't have quite the resiliency that people who have tenured before the boom. So I think we're getting a lot of inexperienced recruiters in the market who don't really know what a tough market looks like or what normal market looks like. But yeah, I want to know your thoughts on that part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on, and I think you've probably seen it across the market generally. I think a lot of businesses opted to go down sort of the 180 model, and I think in a lot of instances that works, or has worked historically. But I think it seems like that is slowly starting to turn. I think with less roles just coming through the door, I think a lot of consultants and a lot of businesses are having to either retrain people into doing the full 360 role, because I think the constant inbound leads just aren't there, and I think it takes a little bit more legwork in terms of actually developing those relationships and making them a bit further, or taking them a bit further. Equally, I think that point you mentioned about resilience is absolutely true, because I think for a lot of people it's just been an absolutely golden market, and I think as soon as there's been a little bit of a headwind, if you haven't experienced that before, if it's the first time you are experienced, it has the potential to be a bit of a shock to the system. So yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, big time. Do you think the 180 model would still work in the current market?
Again, I think it's fairly sector specific. I think generally speaking, from people I've spoken to, it seems to be changing. In my market specifically, I think it could still work. I think the reason for that is it's a relatively small space, so we're not working with sort of hundreds of different businesses. It tends to be a fairly close pool, so the job consistency is there. But I think whereas opposed to 18 months ago, we were having to do no BD, now I'd probably say we're having to sort of ramp that up by about 30% just to keep things trickling in. But I think, yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you've got those relationships and you've got that repeat business, absolutely there's scope for it. But it really just depends on how you set up and sort of what that consistency of job flow is like.
Yeah, because at the minute, I said this guy's joining me in a month's time. We're going down the 180 route, and we're really focusing on building a best-in-class delivery function. I think the reason for that is we tried the 360 model. We tried to hire guys who had a bit of experience in a really tough COVID market where everyone was fighting for the best recruiters in the market and the best graduates, and people were coming into us with loads of offers. So we got the best of what we thought we could get at the time. But I guess with these 360 recruiters, the way I want to build the business is I don't want to build a load of 360 desks and then be able to walk out in the future and just take all the business with them. I'm trying to protect it by going down this delivery route, try and hold on to the business a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that's sensible, because I think just because you get one person or two people in, or whoever you decide to grow and get them on a 180 basis, doesn't necessarily mean that if the need does arise further down the track, you can't hire people on a 360. But yeah, I think I do appreciate the point around wanting to sort of keep the business and not having people leave with them, because I suppose as small operations like you and me are, that's a concern. And I think to put time and effort into, then if people walk out the door, is obviously not what you want. And I think I haven't necessarily thought about it from that perspective, but I suppose in terms of keeping the business makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's not only that as well, is people's skill sets suit different things. So I know that my skill sets are more led to the business development side, whereas I want to bring in someone, and I'm bringing in someone who can really support on that structured delivery side and doing best in class candidate sourcing, and they be almost the candidate champion and creating the business sales candidate and basically create these different parts of the business that are best in class. Whereas when you're focusing on too many different things, I feel you can get pulled in all sorts of directions, and you kind of do everything quite well but nothing exceptionally.
Agreed. And I think what you mentioned there about playing to people's skill set, I think being in tune with what people want and where they're going to do well is probably a very understated skill. And I think I got that wrong in the past when I hired someone who was absolutely, she was brilliant, but I think she was really liked the delivery aspect. And then as soon as I tried to introduce the BD aspect, that sort of then it went a bit wayward. And I think in my mind, I just assumed that was probably something that someone growing their career might want, but in reality, I haven't taken the time to assess, and if I did, I probably would have had a different outcome.
Definitely. So what do you think, what's on the horizon then? 12 to 18 months in the future, where do you think we're going to be?
I think it's still going to be a positive market. I think it's going to continue to bubble away. From my perspective, I think in my space, I think what we saw is that we had sort of 21, 22, we saw a boom of salaries. What's happened now over the last sort of 12 months, that's plateaued a bit. I anticipate that in the next 6 months, we're going to see your salaries run again. The reason for that is just quite simply the time that it's taking for businesses to attract people, and their crucial roles where the businesses need these people. So at some point, there's going to have to be a give. And I think I wouldn't be surprised that if we see salaries start increasing within the next 3 to 6 months across the board, in my space anyway. And then I think probably I suspect law firms will probably start being a little bit more flexible in terms of the types of candidates that they would consider. At the moment, it's very much sort of place the square peg into the square hole, whereas I think going forward, just because of the difficulty, firms are going to have to be a little bit more flexible and maybe start considering people from different backgrounds, obviously within reason. But I think it all just comes down to the fact that these are essential roles they need to get filled, and the longer that they take to get filled, the business ultimately suffers.
Yeah.
But yeah, your space, I know it's obviously developing and moving and bubbling away. What's on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think more generally to start off is we need to see what the economy does to start off with, because that affects investment. Over the last 6 to 12 months, medtech investment is down. And I think if it continues, then we are going to see changes in the world of recruitment, because people are going to need to be stickier with their clients, both contractually and also relationship wise. So there's going to be some big changes. I think we're going to see a lot of, even further, we're probably going to see some shifts. We're going to see more layoffs in the industry, but also in recruitment companies. I think more generally, business development is going to be critical, and it's going to be about standing out in the market in a way that is very different than just sending a good candidate. I think we're going to have to get creative with the way we have our businesses out in the market, how we promote them, how we get in front of clients, and how we see more of them. So I think the next 12 to 18 months is absolutely critical. It's going to base on the economy. But I think recruiters are just going to have to generally be better at getting out there and building their relationships.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think that was going to be one of my points to follow, is that I think it's all very well when things are going well and you can just fling over a spec CV and make a placement. But I think getting close to your clients and candidates, and I think really getting under the hood in terms of what's going on in their business, where their key pressure points are. I think if anything, it gives you the understanding of what sort of the market's doing generally, but perhaps even more so, it will give you those little inches or little centimeters that you need just to get the gap in the market and maybe get your candidate in first, because you know what's coming around the bend.
Do you think recruitment's going to get easier or harder over the next 12, 18 months?
Good question. I think it's going to be quite sticky, just because I think a lot more people are more budget conscious. So I think when I mean, in the post-COVID boom, people were just throwing money at everywhere. People were spending frivolously and weren't necessarily concerned about overspending. But I think now the microscopes on everybody, and businesses in every sector are having to sort of watch their costs a little bit more closely.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with that. So what do you think the good recruiters are doing right now to maximize the moment?
It's come to my point earlier. I think at the end of the day, I think relationships are really what's going to get people through this. I think having those close bonds with hiring managers, with businesses, and sort of not necessarily one or two people on the business, but trying to ingrain yourself with the business as much as possible. So I suppose if there are a limited amount of roles coming out, you want to make sure that you're the agency that businesses are using.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about adding as much value to the client as possible, and getting really, really into what their organizational challenges are. And I think the best recruiters right now are finding creative ways to solve bigger organizational challenges, and being there from not just a recruitment perspective and not being that transactional partner who's a CV sender, but actually how are we helping these companies get to the objectives quicker, whether that's from marketplace promotion, whether that's from getting creative with the terms and conditions and getting longer term agreements in place, but giving them better costs on it. There's lots that I think people are doing, but I think everyone who is doing well at the moment has been doing that BD over the last 12 months, and they're starting to see the relationships come to fruition, and the best people are just building on those and going deeper, and touching more points of the business. So it's not just the hiring manager that you're talking to. You know what the HR's problems and challenges are. You know what everyone's challenges within the business, all the stakeholders within your processes. They're digging deeper to go, right, what relationships do I currently have? What relationships have I got previously? And how can we maximize those? And how we squeeze more and more value out of those? And I guess that's what I think a lot of them are doing. But I think the role of tech is quite interesting, because I'm quite behind on this. But from the retreat, one of the big things was a guy talked about the automation and the automation of mundane tasks, and that's something I'd love to do more of, but it's where to start. But it sounds like that's what the best are doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'm under no illusion that getting your tech sorted and automating what you can automate is the way to go. I think probably from my side, and I wonder if you experienced the similar difficulty, is that you faced with, or rather you presented with, a whole range of different tech tools that you can use. All of them can be implemented and molded in certain ways, and it's trying to decipher what is the best route to go. And I think also, as a smaller business, just having the capacity to do that, because I think that in itself could be a dedicated job for somebody in terms of streamlining workflows and the rest of it.
I completely hear you on that. It is an absolute mammoth task. And whenever you talk to anyone, it's automation is this big buzzword. But then you ask for the actual tactics and no one can really seem to come up with much of an answer. And everyone's saying how you can automate every single task. But as a non-techie guy in a very small business, it does become very hard, and it's almost like there's no guide or there's no playbook, or every time you go to look at it, I get incredibly frustrated because I look at a tech tool, it sounds great on the surface, you look to implement it, and it's about half an hour of digging you've spent there, and then it becomes 3 hours and you've just wasted all this time trying to implement it, and then you've got to test it, and it might work, it might not work. But I think as a small business it can be a time zapper, even though I think the best companies and the best recruiters are doing it really well. I think that's the hardest part, is the actual implementation. And
yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think also with the automation, I think particularly when you're approaching, when that automation is related to clients and candidates, whether it's in terms of BD or giving them market updates or whatever you're trying to do, I think often the benefit of an automation is when it can't be seen to be automated. And I think when you do it so generically across your candidates or across your clients, it's very, very easy to pick up on. And I think as soon as it does get picked up on, then it kind of loses effectiveness immediately. And that's something that I've really struggled with, because I've got all these automations, but I'm finding I'm almost having to tweak it for each individual candidate or client.
So what have you automated? Is it usually the outreach side?
To a certain extent. So yeah, I think in terms of chasing new leads, that's where I try to do it predominantly. But again, it's hard to manage, because I think then if you sort of reach out to 100 people and then you get 35 responses, and then you've got to sort of update each one individually to see who's responded, to ensure that they don't get the follow-up. So it's a continuous battle, I would say, in terms of the admin side of the tech automation.
Definitely.
Have you tried to automate anything?
So I do I use it to feed my marketing funnel quite a lot. So I use Dripify on LinkedIn, which I hope no real candidates are listening online or anyone's listening online, but I try and feed the funnel with it. So I've used it to get subscribers to the newsletter, to introduce people to that, where it's just simple as like, because I'm quite a marketing driven business. I want people to be aware of me before the outreach, because I find that makes a lot warmer introductions. So I've automated on Dripify a series of messages that go out, whether that's driving people to the newsletter, getting them to sign up, and then we start a conversation around that, find out what they thought of it, and that starts the initial conversation. Or whether I've just started doing this is with the podcast that I've got. Every time I release an episode, the guest always has some kind of aim or objective. So the most recent one was a virtual reality training company, and they're trying to increase their sales into the surgical robotics side. So I've started an automation to training and education people in the sector, and just to say, have you seen this? You might have an interest because you're in the training and education space in surgical robotics, and that's quite a personalized message, because it doesn't look automated, even though it is. And then we try and start a conversation around there, and it's driving people into that marketing funnel so they become aware of who we are as a business, aware of who I am, listen to the podcast. So the next time when we actually start to do personalized outreach and try to ask for business, they already know who we are. So that's something that I have automated. I don't do any email outreach automation, but it's what I'm exploring with the likes of Sourcewell and Force24. But that's going to be in the future once there's a few more projects in the mix, which we'll probably come on to with the questions we've got lined up.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think probably the key thing that I'm trying to work on at the moment is the candidate automation outreach, because that's really where we're struggling. I think job flow is consistent, but it's just that candidate piece. And it's just getting to that point where when somebody thinks about a potential move, you want to be the first person they think of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm working on marketing team in the background to try sort that out. Because yeah, it's a tricky one to master, despite the obvious benefits. Yeah,
it is. I think it is really hard to master. But I think that brings us on to our next question, really, which is about marketing as well. So I know that you've been doing a lot of projects around the marketing, and I've been working with the same guy. But yeah, talk to us about whether you think marketing is just a load of fluff, or do you think it has a place in recruitment?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, interestingly enough, historically, before I started Uncover, I did think it was a bit of fluff. And then even probably the first 6 to 8 months of having Uncover, I also thought it's a bit unnecessary. It's just a bit noisy on LinkedIn, doesn't get much traction. And I think one thing that I've noticed is that I think it's often quite difficult to judge the immediate return. But I think, kind of to your point earlier, I have found that the more and more we start trying to engage with the candidate base, the client base, when you do approach them on a more personal based basis, it is just a lot warmer conversation.
Yeah.
So is it fluff? I think absolutely not. I think it's got a massive place, and I think defining your brand in this market and becoming a business that sort of your clients and customers can identify with is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's two sides of the coin. So there's personal branding and that side of marketing, and there's also company brand and company marketing. So one thing that I've had quite a lot of success from is the personal brand. I've got quite a consistent flow of inbound leads for jobs because I've worked on building the personal brand. And the podcast that I've produced, which I know you've got one too, has really hyper accelerated that. It's great from sitting down with the CEO every 2 weeks. So that's one side of the coin. And we never really ask for the business. It's you sit down with us for an hour. We've got a real strong process around turning it into business, but sit down with the CEO for an hour, build that relationship, and then the next time you come to talk to them, and usually it leads to recruitment because they may have told you about their challenges on the podcast. One of their biggest ones is usually recruitment. That conversation is completely warmed up. But also raising the profile is every 2 weeks, someone sees me sitting down with the CEO. They know that I'm very well connected in the space. Surgical robotics is not a well-populated market with recruiters because it's a very, very small niche market. And so the person making the most noise on there is myself. There is a competitor who does a lot more med tech. But in terms of surgical robotics, the one banging the drum every day is Henry Norton. And so it means that when they come to start talking about recruitment and they're having a trouble with a hire, they're thinking, oh, that guy who does surgical robotics all the time it's obvious who you might pick up the phone to, which is really what's starting to work as well. So I think I like how marketing swings into it. I like how it warms up the phone calls. As soon as even people who are cold, a lot of them do know who you are in such a small space. So yeah, I think marketing is definitely there. Where we're looking to do some projects is actually building our corporate brand and removing it from Henry Norton Surgical Robotics Recruiter to having RW Search as a brand. And we're about to kick off a project where that hopefully, fingers crossed, changes. But yeah, I think marketing is not a load of fluff. I think marketing, I can put it down to a lot of the business that I've done over the last 12 months. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think probably on my side, I think the business side is absolutely one element, but I think probably where an area that is understated, I didn't expect it to have this kind of return, was more so on the candidate side. And it's just having that familiarity and sort of driving candidates towards the business as opposed to purely as a business development tool, which is sort of a byproduct that I didn't envision initially when we went down that route.
Yeah, completely. And actually, thinking about it is I approached a guy about a role and he'd seen me from LinkedIn all online. We had a phone call and he said, look, I'm not really interested in the position that you approached me about, but I am interested in, I've seen everything you do on LinkedIn and seen that you're a surgical robotics recruiter. I am interested in engaging you with our company. And that signed into a multi-hire agreement because of the marketing. And that was a candidate approach. He got back to me because of me reaching out to him as a candidate, but it very quickly turned into a client call. And without the marketing, that wouldn't have been an opportunity. I wouldn't have even been in his mind about that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think at the end of the day, you just have to factor it into the budget and make sure you're utilizing it. And I think you said it earlier. I mean, you could be the best recruiter in the world, but if people don't know who you are and can't find you, then it counts for very little.
Definitely. What are you doing in terms of marketing moving forward? Is there anything interesting, any interesting projects you're moving forward with?
So I mean, I think in terms of what we're trying to do, so I think pivoting, well, also utilizing the podcast a bit more, but I think what we're trying to do is really try add back to the candidate base in terms of just constantly providing them with additional value adds. So, because I think probably where we run into the risk of a business that when we approach candidates, historically, it's always been about a role. Whereas we're trying to do something a little bit different where we're just constantly giving them value adds and ultimately get them to then follow up and sign up to they basically become part of our member community, in which case then they get sort of insights into various different tips and tricks for interviewing, interview techniques, whatever it might be. So eventually, if they sign up, they go into a funnel. It then has a 12-week sort of automated emailing campaign, and it's all just about becoming known to them and being the go-to agency for risk and compliance.
Interesting. So what's the community side of it? So is it just part of this email chain, or how are you building that community?
Yeah, so it's still relatively new, but I think we basically got two different pools of candidates. We've got our existing candidate base on our CRM, and then we've got other candidates that we're going after. And I think the whole thing is that eventually, once we've built up the community to a certain extent, then we'll start doing sort of events and talks to engage people more. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about being the agency that people talk about. So if you're doing podcasts, if you're getting people into communities, if you're doing events, and your name as an agency is always popping up, that's ultimately where, as a business, we'd like to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think for small businesses like ours, marketing can help you punch above your weight and get you a seat at that table before you're really ready, where you don't have well, we've got 100 staff in 5 offices all around the world, and you can go and people have seen you, they trust you, they've seen you really loud in the market. And I think also when you do build a bit of a brand, it's really hard to do a rubbish job as well. Is you build it on reputation, and so you really want to kind of protect that. And if you ruin your integrity or credibility, I think people do see that, and I think it'd be very obvious if you were trying to build a personal brand and then were delivering a rubbish service. So I think it does kind of help you level yourself up a bit as well, and make sure that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think in terms of the actual marketing aspect, I think it also, to a certain extent, it kind of holds you accountable in the sense that you need to be getting good stuff out there. There's no point just making noise for the sake of making noise. What you're putting out there needs to be topical, it needs to be relevant, and it's something that candidates want to and can engage with. Because else it's just noise for the sake of it, and perhaps could actually have a detrimental effect, is in the sense of what are they even talking about? This is not relevant.
No, I completely agree with that. Actually, it's got to be good quality stuff going out there. There's no point in just posting for the sake of posting. You've got to really figure out what your brand is, what your messaging is, who your target customer is, what their pain is, how can you push on that pain. And so I agree, marketing isn't a load of fluff, but if you're just sending out like a candidate brochure, how to interview or things like that, which I think has been traditional recruitment marketing, is here's an interview guide or here's some interview questions. And then that's not really the kind of thought leadership. I think marketing is really about what difference can you make to your market from your perspective. And as recruiters, we get a hell of a lot of knowledge from so many different sources about markets that we should really be sharing it. And it is as simple as that, is sharing the knowledge that we get from a lot of people.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. But no, certainly not going anywhere. Marketing, certainly big push on that from our perspective. But yeah, I think interested to see how our next project turns out, and keen to see how it unfolds.
Absolutely. So the last question is, global talent shortages, are they a myth or are they a reality?
They're a reality in my world. I think the rate in which law firms, risk and compliance teams have grown over the last 10 years has been phenomenal. I think whereas it used to be your large international UK firms that have had teams, that's now, well, I suppose those teams are continuing to grow and develop, but I think equally there's been a big push from US firms that are now growing those teams. Large regional and national firms are growing their teams. So it's just a case of supply and demand. And I think even in the bigger law firms where maybe 7 years ago or so teams were 10, 15 people, it's not uncommon to see them sort of anywhere 40, 50, sometimes even 60 people now. So yeah, and the reality, it is still a new space, it is growing, it is developing, candidates are becoming more interested in it, but the demand certainly outweighs the supply currently, which in turn, I mean, it's a good space to recruit in for obvious reasons, and I think it's also a very good place for candidates to be in, because yeah, I think at the end of the day, just increased demand, increased opportunity, increased salaries, really.
Yeah, so I think there's pockets where this applies. In my space particularly, the engineering side is the hardest to recruit in, and that's for a few different reasons. The space is growing like exponentially year on year. It is growing and growing and growing. There's lots of VC investment going into it, but engineering talent, I think, does not, the demand outweighs the supply, and so there's not as many people to bring across from coming into the space, but also engineers are a very risk-averse bunch anyway. So you have to kiss a lot of frogs until you find the right fit for the company. So I think in the engineering side, definitely, but it's about getting creative about the way you engage them. And I think it does create massive opportunity, is having candidate shortages, is if you're a good recruiter, then you can stand out and you can make sure that you secure those people, because if there's talent shortages, there's opportunity to place more candidates. And if you do a good job once, you can do it again and again and again. And it's really about, in terms of engagement of candidates, I don't think it's necessarily about how it used to be with volume-based approaches. I think it's about quality, personalized approaches that really sing to the person you're approaching. So I've done a lot of work on the copywriting, and I follow Mitch Sullivan on LinkedIn. And something I've really worked on is writing for the person who's reading it and writing it. I have a very different approach to a sales guy versus an engineer. And I'm trying to really identify, using the job brief that I get from the client, really identify the drivers of the people who are going to go into the roles. And that's been really key in getting a much higher percentage of reads on of responses for email outreach, for phone call outreach, for LinkedIn messages. And it's been really working. So I think there is big opportunity, but not for people who do the spray and pray approach. I think it will become a lot harder for people the further on the space goes to do that, just mass outreach, general. You hear candidates all the time saying, oh, I'm contacted by 50 recruiters a day. So how do you stand out against them? And it's the ones who are really different. And I think we're doing that quite well at the moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think it's no secret in a candidate short market, most of these candidates are getting approached 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day with fairly generic messages. So I think if you from the outset can define yourself as the outfit that's doing something a little bit different and actually knows what they're talking about, and actually has and actually can advise for more of a consultative point of view, then I think that the opportunity is massive. Because at the end of the day, all candidates do want to work with the best recruiter they possibly can.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think as well, to flip on its head and just kind of play devil advocate, is there ever really a time when there's not a candidate shortage? Like, is it just the same as it ever was, like in certain markets? And it is just really hard to find some certain different roles and profiles. I don't know whether it's that there's a candidate shortage, more the fact that it is just how recruitment is. We wouldn't have jobs if there was abundant candidates for every role to go to. So I don't know, I'm flipping on its head.
Yeah, no, and I think it's well, I think the candidate shortage, it's not necessarily that's the sort of overarching phrase, but I think it can be brought about by different things, whether it's a case of there's actually not enough candidates, or whether it's a case of a whole bunch of candidates have moved relatively recently and now aren't looking to move again. And I think it goes back down to your point around sort of really getting under the hood of what's driving people and what they're looking for, and sort of speaking to their needs and key pressure points, as opposed just to, here's a job, this is the salary, go for it, it's amazing. Like it's getting a little bit deeper in terms of sort of understanding what they're looking for and being able to sort of, to a certain extent, sort of engage with that from the outset and try to speak to what you envision they would need from a career perspective.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I think that's pretty much my 2 pence. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's all good. If James Osborne is doing the editing, maybe I can do my introduction one more time, because I wasn't too chuffed with that.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, my name is Daniel Chatfield. I'm the director and founder of Uncovered Talent. We're a specialist legal risk and compliance recruitment agency that focuses on placing risk and compliance professionals into law firms across the UK, from analysts all the way through to general counsel positions.
Fantastic, nailed it.
Mic drop. If only we could go for if only we could go for a virtual beer now, Henry. Wouldn't that?
No, wouldn't that be nice indeed? But that was quite fun, actually. There was some points where I was just like brain farting all over it, and like some points where I was like falling over my words. But at the same time, it was quite good to get it out, I think.
It's also like it's different. Like I'm in the mindset of doing a podcast for my risk and compliance audience, whereas now it's for a recruitment audience.
Yeah, exactly.
And like previously, I was like I don't want to give away my tips and tricks, you know.
No, exactly. I don't mind giving away the tips and tricks, to be fair. Like who I compete with, if they want to go and try and have a go, then fair play. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's different. And like when I was saying about the automation side, it's like that sounds great to recruiters, but if I say my candidate outreach is, or some of my outreach is all done automated, then it can sound a bit funny. But anyway,
all of my BD is automated. It's
really... I automate everything. No one, no touch points.
I don't know if you spoke to that. You know, the guy who spoke and talked about how his business is automated. Like when he was talking about the guy with the sleeve tattoo. He was in one of the breakout rooms, and he was saying a lot of the roles that they get in are just completely worked on automation. They just feed in the job description into the CRM. It matches them, and then they don't do anything. It literally just it sends out to candidates, filters, sends the CVs, arranges interviews. Like they don't do a thing from start to finish.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Like they're kind of tech roles, and I think it's their model. So like what you were saying about like the relationships and things, and like it's more personal and less sort of spray and pray.
Yeah.
Like they've got a lot of that, and they're
Yeah.
just like, bang, cool, got a CV, we'll send it to 250 companies. And then,
Jesus.
I mean, if you can get that right and it works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can sit back and just let that happen, that'd be sick.
Imagine the dream.
Sit on a beach.
Just
set that
money
all up.
going into account, the dream.
Yeah, big time. And they, automate invoices, debt collection. If it's 90 days late, sounds the dream. I'm very far off that.
Yeah. I suppose we can pick it up another time, but yeah, that's one thing that just kills me, is just having to chase invoices. It kills me.
Yeah, so it's pretty fucked. We've had a couple of like late payers recently. We've got one that's overdue 28 days at the minute, which is quite a long time, but it's not the worst that we've had. But yeah, I think it is a bit of a problem generally. We're looking to tighten up our processes on that. So Mum does our accounts. She's like our unofficial FD. But yeah, she's really we're looking to put in place like multi-touches before the invoice is due, multi-touches afterwards. There's a real process around it. If it gets to 30 days, we're going to tighten up our terms so we can charge interest on all the invoices and just not use it, but threaten it. And then they might take it a bit more seriously. So there's a few things that we're looking to do, because you can't run a business like that. But also I'm going to have a chat with Paul Glynn, who does the finance for a lot of recruitment companies. Because he said he can get invoice financing to below 0.5%. So if you're an established company, so we'll see if he can do less than, or find someone who can do less than 0.5%, because invoice factoring might be a good idea, because 0.5% of an invoice to have it immediately would be really beneficial to me. So we'll see about that. But I need to speak to him. I need to see whether his process actually prioritizes the client relationship, because obviously that's the big thing. Is yes, you could factor it out to a company and they could do the chasing, but if they're really aggressive and ruin your relationship, then that's the big risk. So we'll see.
Like my follow-up messages are so embarrassing. Hi, so hope you're having a wonderful day. If you get a moment, could you possibly please pay this invoice that's 60 days overdue? Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, honestly, that's it, isn't it? It's so like, ooh, please. Because I was on the phone to my client earlier as I was preparing for a call for Monday with them. But he rang me out of the blue stakes. I was like, can I grab 5 minutes of your diary? And he phoned me out of the blue to talk about some candidates. And I was going to on Monday say, look, we need to get this paid, because we put other work on hold to actually do these 5 roles for you. So we put other work on hold. We gave you 30 days and flexed on that because that's what you needed as a company. And it's now 30 days late. So we're 60 days without any payment. But yeah, he got on the phone. I completely forgot about it. And I was like, oh yeah, when you get a chance, could you check on those invoices, please? I was like, fucking idiot. I had the whole plan there.
I forget your stuff's obtained. So do you not work on it until you get cash in bank, or?
No, I work on it when the contract's signed. I started when the contract's signed, because obviously we are owed the money. We know we're going to get it. And I just like to get the process started, because it means we're close to that finalization fee and can start moving it through. So yeah, it's not until the cash is in the bank. When the contract's signed, we have got precedent to go after them for an invoice. So funnily enough, as soon as they sign the contracts and start moving ahead and you send them an invoice, they are very engaged. So we haven't had a problem with that yet.
Yeah, see, mine, I'll place the person. They'll then start in 3 months. They'll then miss the 30 days. It'll then be like 2 months late. So I've got this like 6 months gap, which is fine. Like just gotta keep an eye on what's coming around the corner and not spend too much in the meantime.
Yeah, that's super hard. I completely get that. That's difficult. But it does stop you making a decision, which is why the invoice financing, I think, could work quite well. But I just don't want to fuck up client relationships just to get the quick buck. But it would help with growth plans if we got paid up front, like for the business. But anyway, I think it's recording still, so we'll let James, if he's still kicking around for here, we'll let James go. But yeah. All right, mate. Good to chat to you.
Yeah, nice one. Good seeing you. Let's catch
In a
up
bit.
soon.